Maya Bemba had worked for 15 years as a waitress in the prestigious restaurant The White Swan, located in a chic neighborhood of a major European city. The restaurant was a temple of luxury, its walls adorned with modern paintings and its crystal chandeliers, hanging from the ceiling like stars frozen in time. The white linen tablecloths were impeccably ironed, the crystal glasses sparkled in the soft light of the candlesticks, and the silver cutlery gleamed in the glow of the candles. Maya knew every inch of this room, every step she had to take to avoid bumping into a customer who was too absorbed in his conversation or a waiter who was too busy. She moved in this room like a discreet shadow, her gestures measured and her steps silent, almost furtive. Invisible and effective. She was the silent engine of the restaurant, making sure everything was perfect, without ever drawing attention to herself. But despite her mastery of the tacit rules of the place, she remained a stranger in this universe where luxury and arrogance coexisted with disconcerting ease. The customers, smiling with incredible condescension, treated her as a simple instrument in their service, an instrument they used without ever bothering to see or appreciate her humanity. Maya, black woman in her 40s, single mother, always wore his uniform with quiet dignity. She straightened her hair every morning, but never bending it to the demands of a world that sought to make it conform. She dressed simply, her clothes impeccable but modest. She never spoke more than necessary, and yet, in her silences, there was a discreet force, an entire world that she chose to hide from others. She was there for her job, but above all, she was there to Ida. Ida was the light of her life, the only reason that pushed her to endure the daily humiliations of this restaurant. The icy gaze of Mr. Leclerc, the director, was for her a reality that she did not dare defy. He knew exactly how to pull the rug out from under others, and his favorite target was Maya. As soon as he arrived, Mr. Leclerc, with his slicked-back grey hair and his piercing gaze, never lost an opportunity to emphasize that he had no place for people like her in his establishment. One day, in the middle of service, as Maya passed between the tables with a tray of champagne, he called out to her in an acidic tone, his voice carrying a biting irony.
"It's lucky you know how to hold a tray, Maya."
"Careers are rare for your profile." A snicker followed, accompanied by the muffled laughter of a few customers who had already made this moment a little distraction. Maya, however, did not react. She had no right to react. Her heart sank, but she didn't blink. She never allowed herself to be angry. Each humiliation became a reason to persevere, a weight to add to the pile of sacrifices she made to Ida. Leclerc, for his part, only saw the appearance, that which allowed him to maintain his status, his power, his dominant position. He considered Maya to be elemental servant, indispensable in his role, but without any dignity. For him, the very idea that Maya have an inner world, a universe, a life beyond this restaurant, seemed absurd to him. He didn't have eyes for that. Ida, for his part, lived in a parallel world. At 17, she wasn't like other girls her age. She had no distractions, no outings with friends, no social media. His life consisted of his music. Since the age of 8, she had been playing the violin, a passion that had grown within her like a sacred fire. It was his refuge, sun outlet. In the echoes of the strings, she felt free, beyond the reach of the injustice of the world. Each note was a part of her soul, a part of what she could not say out loud, a silent response to the invisible violence her mother suffered every day. Maya, although exhausted, did everything to nurture this talent. She had saved every penny of her tips, often sacrificing her needs to offer her daughter violin lessons, instruments, sheet music, and workshops. Sometimes, after a long day of work at the Signe Blanc, she washed the stairs of the hotel where she lived to earn a few more pennies in order to pay the music school tuition fees. For Maya, every note of Ida played was a dream that she could never achieve herself, but that she would give her whole life to see blossom in her daughter. But Ida was not blind. She saw the traces of humiliation left on her mother's face every evening, the heavy silences, the times when Maya came home late and just smiled, but a smile that Ida knew too well. That smile was that of resignation.
"Schinu Maya queri dan invisible verden."
One evening, after a long day of service, Maya came home, her eyes tired, her arms full of cups and glasses to wash. Ida, as she sat next to her mother, looked at her without saying a word, but her eyes spoke. She had made a silent promise, a promise that one day she would pay her mother back dignity and admiration which the latter had never received. The June 25th, the restaurant was bustling. The annual White Swan Gala was the event of the year, a gathering of local and international elites. Politicians, journalists, patrons, culinary critics, all were invited. The menu d'exception was ready, and everything seemed perfect. But 2 hours before the start of the event, the classical quartet who was to play the music cancelled his visit, a last-minute emergency.
Leclerc panicked.
He couldn't allow a misstep, not at such a prestigious event. He was foaming, rushing from one side of the room to the other. Musicians were irreplaceable, and the idea of replacing classical music with anything else disgusted him. It was then that, from the kitchen, Maya heard the panic. She knew what that meant. She had seen panicked customers, whispering chefs, nervous waiters. She felt this whirlwind of frustration pouring over her. She hesitated. Then, courageously, she approached the director. "Mr. Leclerc, my daughter plays the violin. Maybe she could." Leclerc, with a contemptuous look, cut her short.
Your daughter?
"A waitress and her little violinist? Why not your cat while we're at it?" Maya, shocked, had retreated into a silence that Leclerc, however, did not even notice. But the chef, who knew Aida's talent thanks to the few stories Maya had told her, intervened. "She is incredible."
Give it a chance.
"You don't have anyone else, right?" Under the pressure of events, and against all logic, Leclerc gave in. But in his eyes, there was only one frozen contempt, a contempt he reserved for those he deemed unworthy. However, he did not know that what was to follow would shake up your world forever. At exactly 8:30 p.m., Ida entered the large room of the White Swan, a bit like an unexpected apparition, an almost unreal presence in this world of luxury and prestige. She wore a simple, black, elegant dress, which contrasted with the opulence of the guests' suits and evening wear. Her hair, carefully braided, framed her calm and determined face. The guests, seated at their tables, exchanged intrigued glances, whispering in low voices. A young girl alone, without an orchestra, with a violin? The audacity of the situation was not lost on them. She sat down on a wooden chair, all simplicity. The contrast with the staging of the gala was striking. The restaurant, bathed in subdued light, suddenly seemed frozen around her. Each person's gaze was fixed on her, both intrigued and perplexed. An almost tangible silence fell as Ida slowly raised the bow and placed it delicately on the strings. The world seemed to hold its breath. The first notes escaped from the violin, crystalline, deep, vibrant with emotion. The music, initially timid, gained momentum, filling the room with a rare intensity. Time itself seemed suspended, as if each sound rocked the atmosphere, transcended space. She played a classical piece with such mastery that you could feel every vibration of her soul in every string she touched. Then, without even a moment's hesitation, she continued with her own composition. The transition was fluid, like a passage from one world to another, from the known to the unknown. His piece, of poignant beauty, told a story. A story of exile, struggle, sacrifices, humiliation, and dignity. She spoke of Maya, her mother, of her silent resilience, of her work in the shadows, of the light she hoped for her daughter. Their eyes met briefly, and Maya's emotion, despite her mask of calm, was palpable. She, who had given so much for her daughter, who had sacrificed so much in the hope that this moment would arrive, felt this music as redemption. She felt every note, every vibration like a silent cry that she had carried all her life. The guests were frozen. Some cried silently, others remained frozen in total stupefaction, as if the music had drawn a veil over their eyes. For the first time in a long time, they heard something true, something that came from the depths of a soul. The world faded away around them, and there was only music, more than this violin which resonated in the immensity of the room. When the last note died down, an immense silence fell over the room. There were no more words, no more gestures, no more breathing. Time seemed to have stopped. Then, like a liberation, an explosion of applause tore the air, a thunder of bravos, of claps. The guests all stood up at the same time, as if under the influence of an invisible force, in sincere gratitude for what they had just experienced. They applauded Ida not only for her talent, but also for the power of what she had embodied through her music. But Ida did not let herself be carried away by the euphoria of the moment. She grabs the microphone, her voice calm, firm, carried by a new determination. She addressed the room, but first, she turned to Monsieur Leclerc, still frozen at his table, red with confusion. "Thank you," she began, her voice echoing in the silence. "What you heard tonight is not just notes. It is the story of my mother, Maya Bemba, who you see here, in uniform. She worked here in the shadows, for 15 years. She served you with discreet grace, without ever receiving the respect she deserved." The murmurs stopped, heads turned towards Maya, who had remained in the shadows, as always, but now her silhouette seemed larger, more imposing, as if Aida's music had sublimated her, making her more visible than ever. She was there, in full light, but no one had really seen her before. Ida continued, the words falling from her lips with a poignant but unwavering gentleness. "She served you with dignity, with love, but you, Mr. Leclerc, you belittled her, you humiliated her, you ignored her. You never saw her, never heard her. But today, it was she who carried me this far. And you were deaf to everything that she was. Perhaps a violin was needed for you to finally listen."
Silence fell again. A heavy, almost depressive silence.
No sound filtered through. Even the applause that had erupted just before now seemed distant, as if the air itself was suspended by Aida's words. Then, slowly, but with undeniable force, the thunder of applause began again. This time he was even stronger, more frank, more sincere. The guests were still getting up, but their applause was more than a sign of politeness. It was a true tribute, an act of recognition towards the dignity of Maya and her daughter. Leclerc, for his part, remained frozen. His face was pale, his gaze lost. He had lost all his confidence, all his apparent power. He no longer knew where to hide. He was the leader, the one who thought he had everything under control, who had just been publicly humiliated. But in this humiliation, it was he who was finally seen for what he was. And Ida, she had just made a silent revolution with a note, with a simple gesture. The next morning, the scene that had shocked the previous evening spread at lightning speed on social networks. Someone, among the gala guests, had the presence of mind to film the moment when Ida, after her masterful performance, addressed her poignant words to Mr. Leclerc. The video, raw and unfiltered, captured the intensity of the emotion and the power of the truth that had just been revealed. The title of the post was as impactful as the scene itself. A waitress's daughter turns a gala hall upside down with her violin and reveals a hidden truth. The same evening, the video went viral. Millions of views, hundreds of shares. Comments poured in from all sides. Messages of support, testimonies of admiration for Ida and for her mother, denunciations of social and racial injustices, calls for deeper respect for those who work in the shadows. People found themselves in the story of Maya, a woman who had been invisible for years, reduced to her role as a waitress in a luxury restaurant. Now, thanks to her daughter, she became a symbol of dignity and resilience. The media quickly picked up on the story. Prestigious newspapers, television shows, blogs and magazines, all wanted to interview Ida. The young violinist, who had become an unexpected star overnight, was now in the spotlight. Invitations to concerts, offers of scholarships to improve his studies, proposals to participate in international music festivals poured in. She was becoming a phenomenon. But beyond the glory, Ida remained true to herself, calm and modest. She hadn't sought fame, just the truth. And today, it was no longer glory she was looking for, but a way to pay tribute to her mother, to the woman who had sacrificed so much to allow her to live her dream. In interviews, Ida spoke of her mother with a quiet devotion, a deep love that shone through every word she said. And at every opportunity, she never forgot to pay tribute to her, to emphasize that everything she had become was thanks to her. One day, during a live interview, when asked how she was coping with this sudden fame, Ida responded simply but forcefully.
You gave me everything. Now it's up to me to give you back the light. These words sounded like a promise.
A promise to never forget where she came from, to never forget the immensity of the sacrifices that Maya had made for her, to give her a chance. And everyone, faced with this declaration, felt the intensity of this commitment, this determination to honor their mother with each performance, each gesture, each note played. For his part, Mr. Leclerc, under media pressure and internal criticism, had no choice but to resign. The shame of his public defeat, the humiliation of having been exposed as a heartless man, devoid of empathy, had become too heavy to bear. But beyond his resignation, it was the pressure from his peers and restaurant employees that made him break. The whispers behind the scenes, the harsh remarks from those who had feared him for years, the harsh criticism from the media, had finally gotten to him. He had believed himself invincible in his position of power, but he had underestimated the power of truth and the power of human dignity. As for Maya, she stayed at the White Swan. But not as a waitress. After the scandal, the restaurant management, in a gesture of reparation and tacit recognition, offered him a position as room manager. It was a position of great responsibility, where she would supervise a team of servers, manage events and be involved in the day-to-day running of the restaurant. This position, a significant rise in the restaurant hierarchy, was a sign of recognition for her hard work and, above all, an act of reparation for the humiliations she had suffered for years. Maya accepted the offer without hesitation, but with a new serenity. She didn't need to shine to feel valued. She had found her place, not through the recognition of others, but through the recognition of her own merit and dignity. With her head held high, she faced her future with renewed confidence. A year later, Ida, who had continued her musical rise with rare intensity, gave her first concert as a soloist in a large national hall. Tickets had been sold out for months. The press was present in droves. The reviews were rave, and his performance was hailed as the emergence of an exceptional new talent. But in this crowded room, one look in particular caught his attention, that of his mother, sitting in the front row, her face marked by emotion, her heart overflowing with pride. Ida's concert was a masterful performance. Each movement of her bow seemed to tell a story, each note vibrated with the emotion she carried within it. And when she looked up at her mother at the end of her concert, there was a silent but deep connection between them. Ida had not only paid tribute to her mother by playing, but she had also raised her, giving her the recognition she had always deserved. The spotlights that illuminated Ida didn't just shine on her. They also revealed the light of Maya, the light of a woman who, despite years of invisibility and humiliation, had known how to stand, keep her dignity and, ultimately, be seen. There is nothing more powerful than someone who, after being crushed, rises again with unwavering grace and strength. That evening, in this large room, Ida did not play only for herself. She was playing for her mother, for everything she had given, for everything they had gone through together. And everyone in the audience knew they were witnessing something bigger than just a concert. They witnessed the redemption of Maya Bemba and the birth of a star, but also the light that only love and dignity can truly reveal.